So I'll call the meeting to order. Todd's all good to go as well, I assume?
You bet.
Thank you. No one is excused from the meeting. So we'll go to item 3, the adoption of the minute. We need a motion for the adoption. Hubie moves the adoption of the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Call for post-agenda items. I have one. I'll just call it sixganation. Any other post-agenda items? Lane?
One in camera legal.
Okay. Anything else? If not, could we get a motion to adopt our agenda? Kelly moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, which brings us to question period, the notice of motion. Do we have some interested people listening today, Todd?
We have a little bit lower than normal. We only have 9 viewing at the moment, but I know everybody's just anxiously waiting for the council meeting to start. Then they'll just be signing in here, hand over fist here pretty quick. Thanks to those 9 for joining. And if there's any questions that come up, I'll be sure to interject at that time.
Good. It might be a good, what else to do but watch a council meeting day, but maybe not. All right, well, we will move on from that to item 8.3. As mentioned, we'll let Jeff and Maria. Oh, Brian.
Yeah, I had a question in regards to cybersecurity. So recently, I don't know if you guys are aware that that pipeline in the eastern U.S. that got hacked out of a. They paid up to, I think it was a $4 million ransom, and JBS, of course, last week was hacked, and I read this morning they paid $11 million. So I'm just curious. You know, and I have so little knowledge when it comes to IT. I just would like an update on what our potential damages can be, or where we're at just when it comes to that component of the corporation. And it doesn't have to be answered today. I just was curious if we could have an update at some point in time as far as what our situation is and how secure we are.
We'll make sure that we get that back to you. I'll tap Roberta, and she's always really good at speaking to that. But yeah, that's always a constant battle. It's a war that you're continually fighting. So you know, friendly reminder to everybody out there: change your passwords and keep secure.
Yeah, it's a craziness. Because, I mean, ransom's the last thing you want to do is encourage people by paying them, but obviously it's the best way out at the present time, which is quite crazy. All right, thanks for that excellent question, Brian. We will move on to item 8.3. Jeff and Maria.
Okay, I think I'll start off, and then Jeff can always add in as needed. So this is a bylaw for first reading, it is the direct control district for the North Headgates. And as you guys are well aware, Jeff has been working really hard with the residents at the North Headgates, cleaning things up. Moved a house last week or 2 weeks ago. We have been working with the surveyors, getting a subdivision plan ready, but as part of that subdivision process, we need to create this direct control district in the land use bylaw that guides the development and subdivision in that area. So we have created Schedule B. I'm not sure if you want me to go through this, but I guess I'll just speak to it a little bit, and if you want more detail, then we can do that. So we are regulating the uses to be a residential type development with a little bit of ability, I guess, to have a small business, the home occupation one, which would include, you know, a childcare facility, sorry, not facility, like a day home, or someone who wants to do hair out of their house. So very small type businesses. The setbacks will reflect what is in the hamlet zoning, I guess, of our land use bylaw. There's also policy that directly relates to the area structure plan, or the area redevelopment plan that was adopted by council. So one of those policies would be no propane tanks for heating homes. So that's one policy that's in there. So staff is recommending that council provide first reading to bylaw 2014-21 to redesignate these portions of the southwest of 51814. From right now, it's direct control and agriculture, and so we'll get that whole area that is to be subdivided into this direct control district.
Thanks, Maria. Questions for Maria? Or a motion for first reading? Kelly?
Yeah, sounds like you're moving forward, and thank you for that. And I would love to make a first motion in this progress.
Further questions or comments? Otherwise, all in favor? Or Brian, did you have a question?
It's really not relevant to this, but I just, you know, in light of the work that's being done on a walking path, I guess I had a question whether that can be accommodated in this thing, but it's really, I guess I don't think it's appropriate for this particular part of the discussion. I was just thought it was out of curiosity whether that was something that was going to be considered in the development.
Jeff, did you want to make any comments before?
Yes, I can comment on that quickly. I have been working a little bit with Jessica from the city, and you know, we've approached the idea. I think she spoke at Joint Services earlier this week on kind of the progress that has been made and who's talked to who and where things have been going. So we have been out there, we have been looking around, and we have identified a proposed possible route for a walking pathway that would lead through the Headgates development. Now, when I say Headgates through the Headgates development, I mean that this alignment would be solely on EID-owned land or county road allowance. It's more adjacent to the Headgates. So it doesn't go on to any private any land that is under private ownership, and also again, this is a proposed pathway that you know, may see some movement here going forward based on the discussion at Joint Services.
Thank you for that, Brian. Wayne, do you have a question?
Yeah, on this on E there, see 12.9E, it says individual propane tanks used as a primary source of heat for structures will not be permitted. Why is that? Are you saying that propane tanks, propane in other words, can't be used as a heat source in this area? Why is that?
Yeah, I can follow up on that. That is directly to be in compliance with the policies adopted as per the area redevelopment plan. So the area redevelopment plan supersedes the land use bylaw, and it does say that propane tanks will not be allowed to heat homes at the development moving forward. So without an amendment to the ARP policies, it needs to read like that in this direct control district.
So what we're doing now is we're saying that all other heat sources are fine, but propane, no, that's dangerous, so we can't use that. Is that what we're saying?
If I remember correctly, the conversation, you'll have to excuse me because it has been a few years. I think that the discussion was more surrounding large-scale propane tanks in grouped residential areas are not exactly ideal. The gas co-op does service the majority of the lots out there. I believe that there were very few homes and cabins left on propane, and those homes and cabins that are heating with propane currently will be allowed to continue and be grandfathered in. However, you know, when those homes move out and a new home moved in, this policy just means that they would need to apply for a contract through the gas co-op and install those types of services.
Yeah, this is a discussion for another day, so I'll just leave it for now.
Any other questions? We need a motion. Did we get a motion? I can't remember. Kelly, did you move? Yeah, right. Here it is in my messy. Yes. Kelly made the motion, so seeing no further questions, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried, and it is a happy day to continue to move forward on this. And Jeff, obviously the things like the moving of the house would be part of the local improvement tax expenses moving forward.
There is a lot of stuff and moving parts going into that local improvement, but yes, part of it will be inclusive of that. You know, some costs that maybe we just to expand on that a little bit, didn't really recognize, you know what I mean? There's 14 lots that currently the Fortis is serviced overhead to the majority of the locations there, and with the realignment of the poles, there's about 14 to 15 locations that are going to have to go underground. So there are a few other expenses that are popping up here and there that are going to be included in that local improvement plan, local improvement tax. However, I believe that the advertisement of that local improvements and how it was advertised and the scoping of it is appropriate for what will be included on that tax.
Good. Okay, Jeff, Maria, anything else for today? I don't think so.
We do have a land use amendment for public hearing, but we can be patient for that one.
Yes, at 11:30. We'll see you then. Thank you. All right, we will carry on at item 8.2, the municipal election. Some information from Lane. Oh,
Maureen,
Brian?
you have Cole on at 10:45. So.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. Yes. $10:45. Goodness, it's already that time. Cole, you're with us. Please feel free to start. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Reeve and councillors. So to start off my report, I'd like to say that we began flushing the hamlet of Tilly's distribution system through the fire hydrants yesterday and continuing today. I did receive an email from Stuart, the fire chief. In the future, we're going to coordinate so that we can work together at the same time, so that he can do his pressure testing that they do for the, obviously for the fire system, since we're using the fire hydrants anyway, and that'll save a little bit on the water usage moving forward. So it's a good idea, and I'll be in touch with him shortly, but I just literally got the email about an hour ago. So I think it's a good idea, and we'll definitely do that come next go around with the flushing of the distribution systems. And just to remind everybody, we're not doing Lake Newell Resort until the fall because of the recent reseeding of the ditches there. So we're going to wait till that takes a bit more. So we won't be doing the spring flushing in the distribution system at Lake Newell Resort. The rural water project, everything seems to be normal operations in that. We get 1 or 2 hookups in a couple month period. Nothing too big as it was in the past. We did have a water quality complaint this last month at a business in the Martin Industrial Subdivision. There again, it was basically owners failing to maintain their cisterns properly. So everything was fine in the water system. It was in their property and in their cistern that was causing some taste and odor issues. Wastewater collection. This is a big one, and our operations supervisor, Ryan, and myself and Jeff will be meeting tomorrow morning to discuss it a little further, but I just kind of wanted to put in my report that heads up. Lake Newell Resort's lift station was one of the ones that wasn't upgraded when Scandia and some of the others were. Tilly is another one that was upgraded, so they're all new and working really well. We've seen some deterioration that just happens with age, and in sewage systems, you've got some corrosion and just basically the degradation of the infrastructure over time. And we're seeing more of that. Last year, we replaced the guide rails for the pumps. They were completely corroded into nothing, and there's large chunks missing. So we replaced those with stainless steel ones last year, but we're seeing some of the pumping infrastructure and the piping to the point where it's failing. So we're going to have to take a bigger look at it and see what needs to be upgraded and replaced. So we've also noticed some things like the ladder going down into the clear well is corroded off at the bottom and stuff like that. And like I said, it's just part of age in a sewer facility. And again, Jeff and Ryan and I will be talking about that at length tomorrow. So we'll give you an update in the future. And those are the biggest parts of my report. Everything else seems to be running really well. We're just ticking along with the warmer weather. Recently, last week, we've been putting out some water from the water plant in higher numbers for sure, and that'll probably continue throughout the summer, so that's a good thing. If there's any questions?
Tracy?
Question was just with the upgrades and stuff that will be needed at Lake Newell Resort, how does that work for who covers the cost of that? Is that does that go back to the residents or who covers that? Because it kind of sounds like it could be quite a bit of work that needs to be done.
That would probably be better suited as the county is the owner of the infrastructure. So how you would recoup that cost, I can't answer that. That would be better for someone like Matt or Jeff or somebody like that.
Matt?
Yeah, depending on the dollar amount, typically if we replace an entire lift station, that's typically done through a local improvement tax because that's a higher dollar value. Any of these repairs and maintenance is typically just funded through the operating budget. So I think the key will be how much are we going to be out for, and then we'll advise council on some of the options for funding it. But typically, you know, repairs and maintenance on all these systems, whether it's sewer break or water break, wherever, they're expensive to take care of, and they don't always surface on a linear kind of trajectory, right? So we do try to accommodate some of that just within the regular operation and maintenance budgets for each of the hamlets.
Great, thank you.
Like I mentioned, we'll be looking at it at length in the near future, and we'll probably have a better idea at the scale in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Cole. Thanks, Matt. Other questions? Seeing none, we'll let you move on with the rest of your day, Cole, and we'll move on with ours. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is 11 o'clock, and Lane had booked in that time for the report on the rec facility improvement funding. And that was, Lane, because some people were possibly attending from your committee that worked with you. Anyhow, we'll turn it over to Lane.
Morning, Council. This is kind of exciting to engage with Council in a discussion here this morning on this particular topic. I think it's a culmination of a fair bit of interaction and discussion that has taken place with many members of the community over the past 6 months. The information that is before Council this morning is the outcome of an extensive engagement discussion that has taken place with most of the organizations that operate recreation facilities within the county. The main objective that was set out for this process was to provide some guidance for Council on how to allocate funds that have been collected for upgrades to recreation facilities. And I think that the group members that participated in this process have come up with some fairly good recommendations that are before Council this morning for consideration. The information has certainly been circulated back out to all of the participants. We were hopeful that there were going to be a few that were going to be available for the discussion with Council this morning, but each have expressed support for moving ahead with the report in the form that it has been submitted. There are a couple of things that some further discussion and direction from Council is going to be required on. Those are outlined in the second to the last paragraph on page 2 of the report. One of them is that we need some additional conversation between what would be considered a minor versus a major project for a category 2 or 3 project. There needs to be some consideration as to whether or not these principles and concepts can be also carried over to existing arrangements that you have in place with your urban municipal partners. And a third point is whether or not the allocation process should remain open to applications that would be coming in throughout the calendar year, as opposed to setting a couple of specific funding periods during which applications would be received. So otherwise, I think that the information that has been prepared and submitted for Council consideration is fairly comprehensive. I would certainly be open to any questions or discussion that Council wants to engage in on this. Flowing out of this is another item that's on your agenda as well today, and that is a draft policy that, if it is to move ahead, would be the final step in the process of dealing with the objectives or that have been set out for this particular public participation and community engagement initiative. I just express appreciation to those that did participate in this process. There was lots of good discussion that that took place, a lot of time spent on the part of the participants, and I certainly appreciated their input and involvement in the process, and I just thank council as well for the opportunity to have been involved in this initiative. It was a good one. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Lane. Kelly, we'll let you start off. Brian?
Thank you for this, Lane. In my read, and I couldn't point you at this point where to, but I had a sense that the condition of the facility would, rather than based on a report, it would be based on the users saying that there's 10 years left in the life of the building or that sort of thing. Was there any discussion on providing reports on, for example, roof load or roof lifespan, that sort of thing? Because you can obtain these reports.
Excellent point. There wasn't discussion that took place during these sessions specifically about what would be considered a determining factor as to whether or not a facility or a major component of a facility should be upgraded for structural reasons or other obvious deficiencies. It was really more a situation where members of the groups that operate these facilities are quite aware of the facility themselves and have a fairly good idea as to what the most pressing and urgent area or item of need is when it comes to upgrading the facilities. It may be an appropriate thing for consideration to be given to a documented full assessment before a major upgrade is going to be considered. That's certainly another aspect that could be included in this.
Brian?
So what was your feedback in regards to operational type funding? I think in qualifying that question, I think you've done the group has done a good job of identifying some of the steps and some of the thought put into the replacement of capital assets and to maintaining some of these things. But I guess I was looking more, because I think we've struggled so much with with funding the operating side of it. You know, we have so many different, like every place is unique in every division as far as how we fund these things. I think we've gone one way, and I think we've struggled with whether that was appropriate in charging everybody the same mill rate and then redistributing that. So I'm just curious what the groups, or whether that was dove into as far as funding the operational side, whether it could be done, whether it should be done, whether it was a willingness to do it on a division by division basis based on what their needs are, or whether it was whether there was a different methodology that was come up with as far as the operational funding part of it.
The issue of funding that was allocated to each of the recreation boards was discussed during the first in-person session that we had in October. We actually put information up there about how much was being generated through the tax base for each of the recreation boards. There was a good discussion about it, but in the end, the scope of this initiative was really to deal with how funding would be allocated for improving the capital facilities. There was interest that the group had and feels that there is some further discussion that should take place about the amount of funding made available for operations, but that was really outside the scope of what this group was asked to deal with.
No, and that's a fair enough question, because I think that was what we tasked this workforce to do. I guess I had curiosity, because the two are connected. They don't live solely independent of each other. And I think it's, I don't want to take anything away from the work that's being done. I think it's good input. I think there's some good thought put into some of these suggestions that are made to us, and I think it's a great first step.
Just a bit further to that, Ellen, I'm sorry, I'll just finish my comment here. Category 3, where it says projects intended to reduce public funds required to operate in the future, doesn't really line up with what Brian's saying. Does it, Lane, as much as sort of like retrofitting to reduce the present operating costs? Is that more along what that part is?
That's certainly one thing, or it might be an additional use that could be made of a facility and would bring in some additional revenue. So really there was two different ways of looking at that particular item. Anything that would reduce, though, the amount of funds required to operate a facility in the future would be considered a Capital 3 funding matter. Sorry.
Category. And it's a good thing for people to be considering, certainly. Ellen.
I thought, Lane, it was a very interesting, well done report. Obviously, there was only 4 meetings, only 1 in person. I think it's amazing what they all came up with. I would like to thank you personally for a well-written report as well. I really like the idea of a application review group that has a look at the applications that come in, and which would give council a really good the thing to go by to make the decisions. And I also like the idea that when an application comes in, that it's going, or no, before the draft is going to be finalized by council, that the we're going to get more input from the organizations. Is that correct, Lane?
That would relate to the policy that's the next item on the agenda. Yes, we certainly would request that before consideration is given to adopting a policy, that the draft document be circulated with a specific request that they have an opportunity to provide feedback on that document as well.
Other questions? Wayne? No? Well, I think anything that's written down and put in policy, we always have to remember can be adjusted as we go, because this is sort of a different structure, perhaps, that we're looking at that will need tweaking. But Lane, so if there are no other questions, do you want to look at the draft policy at the present time as well?
That would be the next step, yes, that council should be taking on this. I guess what we're wondering is there any blank areas that we should have dealt with that have not been addressed that you would want further consideration given to? That's the main thing that we would be looking at on this one, to make sure that we've kind of closed all the gaps or addressed all of the areas that should have been dealt with during this review process.
And that item is at 11.1.
Correct. The policy is item 11.1.
Comments, thoughts, Kelly?
So then it would be in policy that my thinking may be added to. My question about having, I can see how it could relate to the scoring system where you get extra points if you've had a report on the building provided. Or
professional type report, Kelly, or
exactly.
Taking it a step farther than a community-based report.
Yeah.
So it could be then that the policy itself, when it speaks about category 2 initiatives, which are facility life extensions, that council could request that anything in excess of a certain dollar value amount be supported by a detailed assessment of the facility. The detailed assessment could be provided by someone that is in that line of work, whether it's a professional engineer or building trades that would be able to provide a third-party objective assessment of the facility's condition, and the requirement that a report of that nature be submitted as part of a category 2 funding application could be included.
Wayne and Anne-Marie?
In the instance of, wouldn't it maybe be also a good idea, this wouldn't be in this policy, but for the county to have a list of contractors or people that they know have the qualifications to do this? Because if you just get anybody, you can get anything. We should, if we're going to get somebody to come in and assess a building, we should be confident that they have the know-how to do that, don't you believe?
Under normal circumstances, I would think that the person or individuals involved with assessing a facility would not be the same ones that would actually be doing work on the facility. They would be at arm's length, particularly if it's someone like an engineering firm that does that kind of work. They do not get involved themselves in actually in the construction of it. They simply are responsible for coming in and making an assessment, providing a report that is then considered by the owners or operators of the facility.
Anne-Marie?
Just wondering if we're overthinking this a little bit. I know where you're coming from, I think, Kelly, but if a community wants a new hall, whether it's because they don't like the design anymore or whether it is really too old, is that really something we need to be involved in? They have to come up with 75%, I think, for a new building. So if they're willing to do that, to replace an existing building, who are we to tell them to do a report?
Kelly?
Through the chair, this isn't about a replacement building. This is about county money going into an existing facility. So it's a category 2 in our report. And I've had the experience where applicants have come to put in, say, an addition to a building. And then they found out during the process that the roof load, the roof life of the facility was no longer there. So the work had to be halted, and they had to add that portion to continue the renovations. And so now they were putting more money into an older facility. So I would just like to redirect you to category 2. And to your point, Lane, about putting a dollar figure on it, I'm not even sure that a dollar figure would work, because you could still, I mean, you're missing the point. The point is putting good money after bad into a bad situation, right? So I think it's just about having the conversation about what condition the building actually is in, and whether or not it's in a viable position or state to continue to put more money into it.
Looking at the category 2 is the biggest block of the projects. To me, 2 of those categories are long-term pre-planned. So it would not probably be as big in those cases if there's a big plan in place, versus the urgent or emergencies type of situation perhaps that might come along where, and I could see where professional opinions might be needed for sure in a case like that. But, maybe it is a case by case sort of thing too, but I support the notion of putting good money into good money, or adding it to something that's worthwhile for sure. Ellen and Lionel.
Question. I have bought a building before, and what we have done in the past is have a real property report done, and perhaps staff can comment on that. Usually then you get an outline as to what the condition is of the building, what needs upkeep, what needs to be corrected, and that sort of thing. At least that's what my experience has been.
Lane?
If there is going to be a requirement for an assessment of a facility to be done, there's certainly different levels of an assessment that can be undertaken. One could be that it would be done by someone at the building inspection level, where they would come in, would assess whether or not the structure as it is at the present time meets current codes, what would be required to bring it up to code. It's also possible that someone of that nature could provide some guidance as to whether or not the investment required to extend the life for an acceptable period of time would actually be worthwhile. A larger structure, though, where there's a lot more involved, I would think that you're probably looking at the need to bring someone like a structural engineer in to take a look at the facility, and there's going to be additional dollars incurred for a report of that nature. But then there's no question about whether or not you're working with information that is going to have value and just would be something that you could rely on when it comes to justifying the investment of a significant amount of public funds to go into that facility. As it is now, what has been submitted is completely silent on the assessment of a facility, and I think that it's probably appropriate for some consideration to be given to that. It's just a question of what level of assessment is going to be required.
So Lane, that part of that addition, does that need to go into the policy? I mean, there's comments here in the policy about the form, the you know, the form that needs to be used, and would it be on a form that might be changed where there would be comments regarding the possible need for an assessment or evaluation of a building? Or would it be part of this policy?
Yeah, I think that we would be able to address it in the policy. Keep in mind that this has not been, the policy document that is before council has not been formally circulated for comment. It has been distributed. They are aware that it is being considered by council, but the expectation is that before council adopts it, that it is going to be circulated. They will have an opportunity to provide comment. We can certainly include information that this is an item that council has raised and wants consideration to be given to. I can work on some additional edits to this before it would go out that would be in response to this particular request for consideration given to an assessment on facilities, and see how we can incorporate it in a draft document before it's actually circulated back out to the groups that were involved in this initiative.
And certainly there's lots of spots within that policy where it could slot in. Matt.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that's the point I wanted to make. I'm just looking at the draft sample application, and I think, you know, going down the road and trying to determine all of the eventualities that might surface and the different building envelopes or mechanical systems that are going to be coming at you for consideration, I think the application is broad enough to allow for whichever group is reviewing the application at the time to seek that additional information. And I would hope, coming from the user groups, you know, there's information requested here to support the business plan, the estimates of useful life of the facility. And I think a lot of people are going to know if you have a third-party report that buttresses your request, that will support your business plan and your estimate of useful life versus, you know, just some of that off the cuff stuff. So I don't know that we need to get too hung up on the requirement for what type of professional report and what situation. I think the application and the policy is actually broad enough to consider that already.
Good points. So, Lane, then this draft policy will be circulated to your group, or publicly, I guess. Is that what you're thinking now?
Correct, unless council wants some further edits to it before it's sent out for comment.
Okay. Lionel, did you have something at one point? Did I miss you?
Yes, Molly, I did. I'm not certain that I have my thoughts together well enough to give you what I was thinking, but I guess what I wanted to mention was that, you know, when the communities made the decisions themselves to replace facilities, it was based on their ability to afford it, for one thing, and their wants. And now we've taken and changed some of that criteria for them by putting this fund of money out there. And, you know, they may change their decisions to change facilities or rebuild them because they no longer have that restriction, financial restriction. And so I wonder whether we need to use some caution. And case in point, so when Duchess decided to build a new arena, which was a major expenditure for them, and I was involved at that time, the old facility, we were told, was beyond use and beyond code, and whatnot, and it probably was, I guess, theoretically. But so they built a new facility, beautiful new arena, and the remaining building that we thought was structurally unsound was turned into a soccer arena, and it operated as such until there was a fire. And so my point is that sometimes the assessment of the building is maybe not quite as accurate as it could be. I'm not saying they didn't need a new facility, but the old facility was adequate to use for another decade, where we thought it was ready to fall down, or we were told that it was ready to fall down. So I think we want to be a little careful on assessing buildings, existing facilities, and changing the financial position for them. Maybe they'll want to replace buildings more often than they really need to.
All good input. So Lane, is that enough to move forward today? Oh, Brian, sorry.
Well, I'm sort of on the same lines as that. I just was questioning whether we need a motion for you to consider one of the options that you have in front of us there, and I'd be willing to do that. I also think that having a little bit more information given to council in regards to what Councillor Christman suggested is a good thing. And if that could be created within the document as something that council was concerned about, I think that would be great to go back with as a circulated as part of the circulation of the document. So if you need a motion to do, I would say number 2 as is, and then with the addendum to the conversation that existed around having some input in, or having some assessment done on a unit in regards to that criteria number 2.
Lane, you weren't looking for motions today, just direction?
No, a motion to circulate, invite comment on the policy would be appropriate. We would not be asking you to approve it, just formally circulate it.
Okay. So Brian, you've moved that then? Okay. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So Lane, anything else on that then today?
No, looks like Councillor Amulung has a question, but nothing else as far as I'm concerned on that item.
Yeah. Clarence?
Trouble finding the options, but option 2 says request that revisions be made to address the specific items. Now, what can we list those? What's your understanding there, Wayne?
So there's really, sorry, through the chair, there's really 2 items here. One is the actual report itself. The second one is the policy. The policy flows out of the fact that the report has been prepared and submitted. What council has done is provided direction to go ahead and circulate the policy and invite comment on that. With regards to the report itself, if there is need for some additional revision that council wants to include in the recommendations flowing from that, we can certainly do that. I guess it was my understanding that based on the fact that you moved to the policy and were comfortable with circulating the policy, that more or less the content of the report met with council's approval.
So to me, we voted for number one, the way you explained it. I just wonder, maybe Councillor DeJong could explain to me why we wanted two, where there was a request that revisions be made. And I wasn't sure what those revisions were. I'm still questioning
it. Through the chair, I believe Councillor DeJong's motion related to recommendation number, or option 2 for the policy. Councillor Amulong is raising questions about which option under the report. Two different matters.
Okay.
And I think under the report, we have said that those concerns that were brought up can be addressed on the forms that people fill out, or moving forward. Those ideas that we talked about are not going to be forgotten, correct, Lane?
That's right. When we circulate the policy, I can add an addendum that when council reviewed the report, there was interest in including a requirement or encouraging groups to make sure that there is an assessment that is undertaken on facilities for Category 2 initiatives, where we're talking about a significant investment being made that will extend or potentially extend the life of facilities.
Kelly?
Through the chair, to Councillor Amulong's point, I would like to make a motion, option number 2 under the report. Does that clear things up?
No.
It doesn't? Okay.
Not to me.
Because we do have 2 RFDs placed before us, and we've kind of jumped ahead on the agenda. We've had the report presented to us, and now we're talking about policy as well. So that's where the confusion is, I believe. And I think Lane is looking for two motions. Is that not correct, Lane?
A second motion would certainly be acceptable when it comes to adopting the report, and if there's a need for the report to be expanded to include the assessment of the facility, we can certainly do that.
And to my first comment, you know, it could even be discussed in the matrix where points are given for that type of report provided. So that is my motion. Option number 2 under the report, 9.1, is it?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Tracy.
My concern with this is we're not actually wanting to make changes, or in my understanding of our conversation, we're not wanting to make changes to the report. We're wanting to make changes to the policy, whereby in our policy it would state that the assessment would be needed on the building. We're accepting, or we're wanting to accept the report as is, but we would like to see some changes in the policy, is how I'm looking at it.
Lane.
Okay, in response to that, I guess if the intention is to include a requirement for an assessment to be undertaken on a major facility, that would then drive a change to the actual policy document as well. And I think that maybe what we should do is just back up, have council confirm what their expectation is with regards to the requirement for an assessment to be included in the report itself. we can circulate that back out to the groups that participated in this process, let them know that the report was presented, reviewed with council, and council raised one additional item for consideration, and that is that a report should be provided, an assessment of the facility should be provided for a Category 2 funding application. That would then drive quite likely a revision to the actual policy itself. I'm sorry that it's, I mean, we should have backed up and finished off the report itself before we move to the policy, but I'm thinking that we can go ahead with this, request that the revisions be made to the actual report that would include the requirement for an assessment of facilities for major funding application requests under Category 2 projects.
And I probably contributed to the confusion because what I heard was that that could be dealt with without a lot of, I mean, there's forms that are going to be filled out that can be adapted and changed, but this is fine too. Option 2 has been moved as a motion with a reference to the concept of having a professional report. I'm calling it professional, fairly loosely used in the Category 2 business. Okay? All in favor of that motion? Opposed? That motion is carried.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to say I abstain because I am totally lost of where we are. I'm totally lost. And that's probably my fault, but I'm not going to oppose or approve of it. So I'm going to abstain from that vote. Because I really do know what we were voting on.
Well, I'd like to clarify it one more time because I don't think you're allowed to abstain, Councillor Amulung, through the MGA. We're on item 9.1, where there are 3 options. And what we were looking at today was the report done with our public who helped Lane put together the information that he has reported on. And the options presented were to approve in principle the findings of the report, request that revisions be made to address specific items, or request that participants reconvene. And I made the mistake of assuming that we were just sort of approving it in principle and moving on. And so I have created lots of commotion and confusion, obviously. And so instead we move back to that and we are requesting that revisions be made, particularly under the Capital 2, or under, not capital. What is it? What's the?
Category 2.
Category, thank you. Category 2. Does that clear up what?
So that would then be the revision that we consider evaluation of the buildings.
Yes.
Because if the building is burnt down or its roof is leaking, and we really don't need an assessment if the foundation is gone or whatever. I mean, there's sometimes that it's pretty obvious without needing a assessment.
Yes.
And most of the time, communities, they get professional people in to assess the buildings and so forth. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, you have to use some, I hate to use the word common sense here, but you absolutely do. And I don't think we have to be fearful that people are going to be jumping to irresponsible decisions when they're putting 75% of the dollars into it. So I just think we need some flexibility. Remember,
that category is, the 75% category is placement, a new building. We're talking about improvements, the category 2,
Okay.
which is in the report.
Okay.
So do you feel? So
Well, I'm
we
not
can-
moving forward, so fine. Just carry on.
Okie dokie. All right, so we got through that one. 11.1, this draft policy has also been voted on as to move forward with it. Okay. So that's good, Lane, for that today.
Yes. Good on those 2 items. Thank you,
We're
Council.
going to be hearing more about that. It's going to be coming back to us. Anyhow, the report. Let's get back to our public hearing, which we are overdue on. And I hope that there are not lots of people waiting on that. So we need a motion to move into public hearing. Hubie will move. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Maria, could you tell us about this one, please?
This is a, pardon me, public hearing for bylaw 1-21. It is an application to rezone an approximate 3-acre parcel of land from agriculture to acreage residential to accommodate a proposed subdivision. This land is, well, where is it? That's a good question, right? Sorry, is in Division 8, 5 kilometers east of the village of Dutchess. This would be considered the 6th parcel out of this quarter section, which is why the land use amendment is required prior to a subdivision application. You're muted, Madam Reeve.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Are there any questions in regards to this public hearing? The bylaw that we will be moving into? Remember, this is your opportunity to get information before we proceed. So, seeing no hands, Kelly?
A question, Maria. I'm looking at the aerial map. There is a small strip of land between 2 residences. Will that strip of land stay with the court, with the larger piece?
Yes. So initially, the applicant wanted a smaller portion of land, but in the land use bylaw under acreage residential, the minimum parcel size is 3 acres, which is why they've increased the acreage to the south. So yes, that little strip of land is intended to stay with the remnant parcel.
Brian and Wayne?
And just for a little bit further information on that particular strip of land, that's actually a drain that would be considered a fairly significant part of a drainage system that meanders through that property. It basically cuts right between those 2 pieces and then goes straight south back towards the highway. So.
Thanks, Brian. Wayne?
Then we have another piece of land just to the north of that. We've got a lot of little pieces all over the place here that are just about useless. So couldn't they just go right up to what is it, to the property line there to make it square? Like,
Maria?
There is a cistern on the north boundary of the proposed subdivision that services the house that's proposed to be subdivided, as well as the acreage to the south. So it provides water to both locations, which is why the applicant wanted to keep the north boundary of that proposed subdivision where it is, so that that shared cistern could stay within the company owned land, and that would be the farmland or the remnant parcel.
Which is a good reason. Any further questions? If there are not any further questions, we need a motion to move out of public hearing. Tracy makes that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So we are out of camera and we'll move to the bylaws for this one. We need a motion. Brian?
I'll be happy to make that motion, and because I was supposed to ask questions during it, I just wanted to apologize for making a statement about that waterway between the two properties, and also on the north side, to Wayne's question, that those landowners that own the farmland to the east of there, they store some equipment there. I think they put some bales there, so it's not really a wasted piece of land. It's they maximize the use of that property, and anybody that's gone down that road knows a very good farmer. So, anyways, I would happily make the motion to accept this
for second reading.
For second reading, thank you.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And we need another motion for third reading, please. Lionel moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Lane, perhaps if you are available, and you are, we'll just finish off 8.2. The municipal election bylaw that you've brought forward.
Thank you, Madam Reeve. So preparations are moving forward for the fall election. There's a number of things that are already underway, but this particular bylaw is one that is being presented for consideration by council. If it's going to be approved, it needs to be approved by June 30th in order to take effect for this election. There's really three different issues that this particular bylaw deals with, and just I bring out the fact that it needs to be considered by council regardless of the outcome of the legal challenge to bylaw 1998-20. So the three issues that this particular bylaw addresses pertain, one of them is the location of polling stations. We have historically had one polling station per electoral division throughout the county. If the potential is there for the number of divisions to be reduced, The distances required that electors would need to travel would increase, and we're suggesting that polling stations should be made more readily available throughout the areas to increase the convenience to the elector for voting purposes. Two of the other matters that are driving this particular bylaw relate to the fact that the province is moving ahead with a referendum question and a Senate election vote that is also scheduled to take place in conjunction with the municipal election this fall. Because there is going to be additional ballots that will need to be counted that relate to those two provincial election matters, we're asking for authorization to begin the count on advance poll ballots prior to the close of polling stations, which is 8 o'clock. And then the third one is that if there isn't going to be an election required in each of the divisions, we can avoid costs that would be incurred just to conduct polling stations exclusively for the Senate election and the provincial referendum question by grouping larger areas together and providing opportunities for residents to vote on those two matters in a shared location. So those are the three issues that this particular bylaw will address if it's approved as presented. One other matter that it would be appropriate for council to discuss is the issue of special ballots. There is an opportunity for a municipality to provide for special ballots. Special ballots would apply in three limited circumstances. One being an individual has a physical disability that literally prevents them from being able to attend a polling station. Another one is a situation where individuals wishing to vote will be away during the entire election period. And the third is that they might be an election worker or a candidate or a representative on behalf of a candidate that will be tied up during advance polls or on election day and would be unable to otherwise cast their ballot. Historically, we have not had or provided for special ballots, and it's interesting that the other municipalities in this area have not either. There's not that many municipalities that do offer the special ballot option, and if we're not going to be providing for the provision of special ballots, the bylaw or the election bylaw that's before council does not need to address those specific requirements. If there's questions, I can attempt to answer them. We are asking for first reading of the bylaw as submitted.
Clarence and Wayne.
So as I'm listening to this and as I was reading it again, we're saying we need 10 polling stations if there's an election in each division, irregardless of how many divisions we have. And on the other hand, we're saying that if there's acclamations in some of our divisions, whether it be 10 or 7, we could have less we can have less than 10 polling stations for Senate election and provincial referendum. I have a little trouble with that because it seems to put different weights on what we're voting for in the next municipal election. And so I'm just kind of wondering if I understood that correctly or not.
Lane?
You have understood it correctly, and yes, that is the truth. I guess the question is whether or not we want to go to the same extent for the Senate and the referendum election as we would go through for the divisional councillor elections, if in fact some of the council positions are going to be determined by acclamation. We can certainly ensure that the opportunity to vote is there regardless in all 10 divisions for the Senate election and the referendum question as well. But if that's not deemed as important, the bylaw as submitted would provide an opportunity to reduce the number of locations where polling stations would be held for those two questions.
So Elaine, it allows us to reduce if we choose. Is that what this bylaw does?
Correct.
Doesn't mean we will.
Ultimately, it's up to the returning officer, but the returning officer would certainly take into consideration the direction that council provides on that. It provides flexibility if that's something that you are wanting to have the flexibility on.
Gotcha. Brian.
So here's a crazy idea, but I'm going to say it anyways. What about having a polling station on our handy bus? The handy bus goes to all our facilities, to all divisions. It crosses boundaries. And how difficult would it be to have a returning officer ride the handy bus? That way the people that are handicapped would be able to access it. You could schedule it so that people would know that the handy bus is, as it comes through our communities, it could have a dedicated time that it's there for a specific point in time that could be advertised, and I think you could check a lot of boxes. And I don't think it's been done before, but a mobile handy bus has been done before, not in our facility, not in our municipality, but it's being done in Calgary and some of the bigger municipalities to capture homeless people and such, to capture their vote. So I'm just wondering if that's ever been considered, and if there's hiccups along the way that I haven't considered.
Lane?
Interesting concept. I think that the possibility of a mobile polling station, we would have to check that out. That would certainly be different than a special ballot. A special ballot is where we make the ballot available. People are able to cast their ballot and mail it back in. To date, we haven't had any concerns raised, and historically they have not been raised in the past for elections about people not being able to come out to the polling stations. The bigger question is how many polling stations should there be and how close they need to be to the communities where people reside.
Yeah, and just so I'm clear, sorry to interrupt, but I was thinking about this concept more for the advance poll, not for the actual election day poll. So I just want to clear that up.
So Brian, advance poll for everyone or advance poll for those with handicaps?
Advance polls for everyone. And so I guess my thought was, okay, so our handy bus goes to Gem, it goes to Rolling Hills, it has scheduled days. That would be the scheduled day of their advance poll for that community. If you could not make the date or did not wish to make the date for the actual election date, you know, this would be advertised as a location where you could cast your ballot. So first of all, those people that have challenged with have mobility issues would have access to it, that live in those communities, and also it could be a stopping point where residents within those communities that don't have, that aren't, or that I see that there could be a challenge to getting to the poll on election day could cast their ballot in this method. So it would be a polling station basically on wheels, and it would be synchronized with the handy bus. And it's just something that I thought about a while ago, and I thought, well, you know, we have the ability to move people around. Well, why wouldn't we have the ability to put a returning officer on a handy bus and let them do two tasks, or achieve a task without having to add a whole lot of technical stuff to it.
Okay, I'm still a little confused. Like, would this be one day only for the whole county?
No, it would be aligned with the regular handy bus schedule, and that would be advertised that, okay, so let's say it's next Wednesday. Well, next Wednesday that bus goes to whatever community it goes to, and the advanced poll would be that day, and it would be able to accommodate the people that live in that community.
I'll go back to Lane and then Ellen.
I guess a couple of things to be thinking about. Number one, we are looking at conducting an election during a pandemic. We're hoping that it's going to be at the end of the pandemic, but we're still needing to make plans for holding an election during a pandemic, and the social distancing and the spacing and everything else that is in place right now, we expect will still be a requirement on election day or during the advanced polls. And logistically, you would have a real challenge doing that and meeting that standard with a polling station in the minibus. The other is that the process of attending an advanced poll for the purpose of casting your vote should require the same amount of effort and sacrifice on the part of the elector as would be the case if they were to cast their vote on election day. And the expectation is that those who are wanting to vote attend a polling station to cast their vote rather than have the polling station come to them. Quite literally, if we were to open it up with a mobile polling station that comes to you, chances are you could have 4,000 electors all want the polling station to come to their yard site so that they could go out and cast their vote. Those are things that off the top of my head would need to be taken into consideration in thinking about providing a mobile polling station. We do have advanced poll dates that are tentatively scheduled at this point. It's October 2nd and October 10th. So the 2nd is on a Saturday. We're looking and the 13th is the second one. It's October 2nd and October 13th. And both days they would run from 10 to 6. We're at this point planning on the advanced poll taking place here at the county office. That, of course, is subject to whether or not council has an interest in taking a further look at the possibility of a mobile advanced poll.
Thanks, Lane. Ellen and Wayne.
And of course, it does exclude the people that are away. Perhaps the snowbirds, what have you, they would still not have a chance to vote. That would almost make it better to have a special ballot, but how do you determine if somebody is not able or is away? Because then you still have the risk that a lot of people say, oh, let's just get the special ballot and do it that way, so we don't have to drive in, you don't have to wait in line. So there's always going to be some issues with it. But further to Lane's point, the pandemic in England has resumed rather quickly again. So we are sort of behind them. So I'm a little bit leery as well that it's not over yet. So my question is this: how difficult is it to produce a special ballot and just send it out to people that request it? Is this a huge expense?
Through the chair to Councillor Unruh, special ballots can be provided for. It will be additional administrative effort, but it can certainly be done. And if that's what council wants to do, we will make it happen. We have not done them in the past. It can certainly be done going forward in the future. A special ballot would normally only be requested when people know they're not going to be in the county during the election period. It's not meant to add convenience to voting if they're going to be present in the county during the election period.
Clarence or Wayne and Clarence.
2 points. Clarence, he brought this up about if we have an acclamation in one division, then we can move the ballot around for the other two voting issues. But I think we should just maintain it as we would if we had elections in every division, because we're not deciding what are important issues for the voters. And secondly, you know, we've never done these special ballots before, and maybe it's time we do. Even if we only get 2 or 3, but we're giving everybody in the county a chance to vote with this. And okay, it's going to cost us a little extra money, but we only do it once every 4 years. So I think we should maybe go this route.
Clarence?
So if the handy bus is running, you have to remember that the handy bus is only at, say, let's take Rolling Hills, 15 minutes or so in Rolling Hills, or the rest of the time they're driving off to Brooks so that it's gone, and then in the afternoon it's there again. So your time is pretty limited. So that, I like the idea of the mobile polling station, but whether it's in the handy buses, you basically, if you want to have a certain amount of time where you're going, you're cutting into those people who do use the handy bus, and I don't think that should be the case. So, mobile polling station, that has some intrigue, but to use the handy bus, which is used for some other purpose, I think is perhaps restrictive more than we think it is.
And I also believe that we need to, as Lane pointed out, be thinking that the pandemic may have returned. We have to plan as though there is a pandemic possibility. So mobile voting would be, yeah, I think, you know, goodness, pretty soon we're going to be dropping into people's bedrooms to wake them up to get them to vote. They do have a responsibility to go out and vote. And if people are physically handicapped and can't get somewhere, that I can appreciate. If you choose to be away from your area during an election, well, that's a choice you make, I guess. And sometimes it would not be, I mean, maybe there'd be something comes up where you're away out of province for a funeral or something. But I think we need to realize that people have a little bit of responsibility themselves in all of this. Lane, I ask again, with this bylaw that's in front of us, we can decide once we see how many provincial referendum issues there might be, or how many Senate things might come along before, or acclamations, before we decide where our polling stations are, correct? We could decide at some point, yes, we need all 10.
Yes, that would certainly be the case. The bylaw needs to be passed so that if there is interest in reducing the number, you have that option. But if there is no interest, even with the bylaw in place, you can still proceed with 10 electoral polling stations.
Okay. Tracy.
Yeah, I was just going to make the motion to proceed with the first reading of the bylaw then.
Kelly?
Just probably a really silly question, but I just need to ask it. Is there any remuneration from the province or the feds for running their election? Are there questions through? Oh, there is?
Yes, there is. They will be paying municipalities a portion of the costs incurred to conduct the election.
See, it wasn't a silly question. I would have bet no. Thank you.
All right. Tracy has made a motion for first reading of this bylaw. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And we will recess until 1 o'clock, I believe, which is when we will be going in camera lane. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.